Yoy!
I'm not going to worry about your level of concern.
Yoy and double yoy!
We talking about
Twitter.
Triple yoy!
Think of how stupid the average person is, and then realize half of them are stupider than that.
Quadruple yoy!
Everything hurts.
We want them to be fat and sassy and spoiled.
When are we going to stop doing this to Mike Tomlin?
We mock ourselves.
It's now the beginning of the longest off season. Last year's off season was long. Feels like they've all been long these past few years.
Yeah, since we started this show, well, it's helped us a lot. I'm not sure it's helped the team.
Yeah, we're at fault. I blame us. I blame me. I blame me, that's for sure. It's what Jin's talking about. The conversation about the Steelers' social media conversation. Exposing all your hot and toxic takes. And on a week like this, I tuned out the takes.
Good.
Good. We'll have takes, but
that was the right thing for you to do for your mental health and, frankly, for mine, sitting here next to you going over this a few days later. And thankfully, it was a few days later. Thank God we didn't record this right after the game.
Right after the game, well, I don't say we were at the comedy club.
Yes, thank God for that too, because so I didn't have to sit there and just wallow in that. But yes, but also I'm glad that I certainly feel less toxic today. But that's also just part of the grieving process, the grieving of the season.
It's the show that Da Bomb says is unique and awesome. Commentators are always positive. Okay. Maybe more positive than the fans.
Right.
They have great reasoning and give context. Spot on about the fan. How can Steeler fans think reasonably when it's so skewed to negativity? Like gaslighting almost. I agree. Yeah.
That's the only thing. I think that's a lovely comment. Very dead on, of course, and I greatly appreciate it. But that almost is you being kind and positive to Bomb.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it gaslighting? I think it's just, yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, I think it's also they're serving, as having been there for a few weeks when I was in Pittsburgh, I kind of think like they're also serving a market share. You know, like in a way, unfortunately, there's more of that. There's more business and negativity than perhaps there is in not.
Who is the show for the Steelers fan? It's not Mark Madden. It's not the fan. I guess is it DVE, I guess, in the morning?
Well, I think there's the Steelers have their own in-house state media, and that helps. But I mean, and that's certainly more positive than most. But even then, you know, it's in the words of Tomlin the other day. I'm not here to sell you optimism. Not today.
No one, few are. I'm going to try to sell. Maybe I'm the alternate to the fan. I'm going to try to sell some optimism. I don't know. I want to welcome our newest subscriber, Johnny A9.
Hey,
thank you for subscribing. I know we also lost a follower. Luckily, it doesn't tell you who. So, good riddance. Good riddance, Colin Dunlap. Is that who it was? I don't know.
But I could see wanting to like unsubscribe from some Steelers stuff in the wake of this game. I can totally see wanting a clean break, wanting to be away from it. I mean, I'm not saying that's why they did it, but I could see that. I certainly did that when I was a kid.
They heard that Christmas episode and was like, what the heck is this? I was hoping for a little more. Actually, it got some good clicks. I appreciate everyone who clicked, but maybe some responses like, this is awesome, or... I don't know what. It got some clicks, so someone shared it somewhere. I don't know.
That's the only measurement we have left in this world, or we got are some clicks.
I should have put it on Reddit, maybe. I don't know. But today's show is going to be cool. We've got Jim Rooney, brother of AR2, coming on the show. He's written a book about his father, Dan Rooney, called A Different Way to Win.
Cool.
So we're going to we'll talk about Dan Rooney, but we'll talk current state of Steelers. I'm not going to just stick my head in the sand, or am I? All right, enough caucus. Let's get to some of these takes. Oh, God. If only computers worked. Okay, let's get to these takes. Starting with at DVE Randy Ballman from WDVE. Least buzz ever before a playoff game in this town, and it's not even close. I don't know. This kind of maybe foreshadowed the game entirely. I mean, it was the biggest collapse for a Steelers playoff team in franchise history. So maybe that had something to do with it. But
That might have had something to do with it.
There was no. I felt like there were no pep rallies. No. I guess it's too early for Groundhog Day. I remember, the Super Bowl days.
Right.
Groundhog Day would be a big Steelers pep rally. I guess
Certainly.
we didn't make it that far, but
No, and the 4-game losing streak leads to that. And I think it's also, to piggyback on what you said, because you're right, it was the losing streak, but it wasn't just losing streak, it was how they lost. They were only ever in one of the games, the Cincinnati game, and even then, that was the one, they still trailed it by double digits. So, I mean, at a certain point, I can't necessarily blame the fans for having a lack of buzz going into this game, because I think the writing was on the wall, despite the fact that I'd convinced myself by Saturday afternoon it was going to be competitive.
yeah,
That's just dirty rumors.
that was a dirty rumor. The Tomlin tweets. Dude, I had to ignore so many of these.
I bet.
But we'll give at Barstool Sports. Mike Tomlin, if he never inherited Bill Cowher's players, and it's a picture of Jeff Lewis. Again, all the same criticisms come back. It's like, these are Bill Cowher's players. Bill Cowher hasn't been in the Steeler facility in, how many? Over 20, almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years. I think he meant, but I mean, this particular hater tweet is in the context of Tomlin never would have won a Super Bowl without Cowher's players, which is also ridiculous because there was a lot of turnover by the Super Bowl 43 team. I mean, there are plenty of criticisms you can lay at Tomlin and whatever else has happened. This is not one of them. This is simply grasping at straws. I've tried to separate in the last week who's negative because they're a hater and their negativity and they're simply consumed by negativity, and who's negative just because they're sad. Like, who wanted something more and that didn't happen. I think that's an important distinction to make in the fan base this week, because there's a lot of people that are just sad and that's how they're expressing it. And as the mourning and grieving process goes on, that'll change, as it always does.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sad too, and then you kind of just sulk away, but to find reasons to be like so anti, this and anti that, like, what's going to happen? Are they going to make big changes? No, the teams that make big changes seem to be the fickle ones that year in and year out are not competing in the playoffs. And the Steelers, again, it's always like 10-7 is mediocre. No, it's not mediocre. It is it's become the floor for Steeler Nation. And we're so fat, sassy, and spoiled that we take 10-7 to be mediocre and then expect the impossible, having to be in the Super Bowl every year. It's impossible. It's impossible.
Well, Tomlin did say there will be big changes. That was something he mentioned in the press conference, and it's certainly necessary. I don't know if I could call people spoiled that saw 5 losses in a row, one of them competitive. I don't know if I
deal with it.
They're spoiled anymore.
Deal with it. It happened. It happened once in our lives. It happened once.
Well, I mean, what is it? 3-game losing streaks after Thanksgiving for the last 6 or 7 years. I'm starting to move off of thinking of these people as spoiled. I don't know if I could say that sitting here. That can certainly change, and maybe this is me working through my feelings, but I'm struggling to call these people spoiled after the last month.
Maybe if you're 20, if you're 20 years old and this is all you know, I'll give you that maybe. But I don't know. It's like, 3-game losing streaks in the well, you got to win games to these are still competitive teams, so they got to win games some point in the season.
That's what I'm hoping for next year, that this doesn't keep going.
And if it does, suck it up. deal with it. If it does, whatever. If it's Kyle Allen quarterbacking and there's another losing streak, suck it up. Deal with it. or trade in your towel for one of these fine organizations like the Jets or the Giants, two big New York media teams.
Certainly. Oh, yes.
At Andrew Sports, Chris Andrews. I don't know if Mike Tomlin has lost the locker room or the support of the Rooneys, but he's lost the support of the city and Steeler fans all over the country. That has to change. You know how it's going to change is if Steeler Nation wises up to the realities of Mike Tomlin. You know, you can hate on Mike Tomlin all you want, but who can, if we lost the support of Steeler fans? Yeah, there's a percentage of those fans that was never on board the day he was hired.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Again, I can see being disappointed. I can see being really sad. But I mean, and again, it's not, as we've seen with many of the other mediocre teams that Kyle mentioned, you don't necessarily need the support of the fans and all that. But boy, winning would turn all this around real quick.
Of course. Steeler fans don't deserve a win yet. They've got to deserve a win. They've got to play up. They've got to show up for a win.
I'm not sure it was the fans that gave up 300 yards rushing to Derrick Henry.
The equivalent. I think the fan equivalent of giving up 300 yards rushing or more. Giving up 300 yards rushing to not even to a Derrick Henry. The Steeler fans gave up rushing to Dree Archer. I don't know.
That was a good pull.
I don't know. I was trying to think of who was the.
Oh, no, I know what you were trying to go for. I think you nailed it. I think that was the least likely person to run for 300 yards, except for maybe Chris Rainey.
Ben Reese or something. I don't know. Who was the Jets guy?
Ben Tate was the guy that they called in the last Ravens playoff game they lost.
At Zico06, Zach. Going to need to make every home game hell for Tomlin. Fire Tomlin chance start in the preseason. Oh my God, this is if we give Tomlin the Matt Canada treatment or the Mitch Trubisky treatment, like that's beyond the pale for me. I will. I don't think I'll tune out. I'm waiting for the opportunity to tune out. What will it take for me to tune out?
I think it's just. I think in the last month, I think you've mentioned that multiple times that you were looking for the off ramp. But I also think you and this person are kind of saying the same thing in different ways. Like they're looking for the off ramp too. They're looking for a way not to care. What I can say is, by the time the preseason comes around, this team will have made enough changes, and it will look positive enough that there will be a way to talk yourself. I don't know if necessarily talk yourself into the right phrase, but a way to think, okay, this could work, just as it did 2 years ago with Kenny, just as it did last year with Russ and Justin, and it did to an extent up until they played the actual contenders who were actually competing for championships. It really did look like it could work, and I know by the time the preseason rolls around, if not like OTAs, it will definitely, if not free agency, it will definitely seem that way.
Oh, yeah. In March, we'll be giving gold jackets to Troy Fautanu and Nate Herbig and whatever new piece of the defense we brought in. Oh, highest paid defense. Yeah, but this time we've got this guy at nickelback. So,
and hopefully they will not get blown out in the playoffs this time.
Okay. How about, we got to. I guess we'll talk quarterback. This will be the one quarterback thing we say. At Williamson NFL, Matt Williamson. Over the past 5 years, 70 teams have made it to the postseason. Among those qualifiers, Tomlin's Steelers teams have ranked in QBR 58th, 64th, 67th, and 68th. So who were those four quarterbacks? It was Russ, Mason, Rudolph,
Ben and Ben.
Ben and Ben.
Yeah.
So I mean, is Russ was Russ any different than a Mace or a Kenny at the end there?
I was about to disagree, and then you said the right thing at the end of your sentence. You said at the end. At the end, it kind of ended up the same place. That said, geez, that game on Saturday, I can't blame that on Russ. Russ didn't give up a 95-yard drive the first time the other team had the ball. He didn't give up, he didn't give up multiple 90-yard drives in the first quarter. Sure, you need to respond, and the offense sure didn't respond, nor did they I still can't get past that they took the ball at the beginning, but that's not the quarterback conversation we're having right now. I can't blame Russ for how that went. By the time, is it a problem that the offense didn't start quickly? Yes, because by then the defense, of course, was just atrocious, and there was no way that they were going to be able to get back into that game. But I can't lay this one entirely on Russ. Not that I want to see him again next year. I think Russ is a great dude and a great quarterback and deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, but I just can't see running this back. That has to be one of those big changes that Tomlin told us is coming at his Tuesday final press conference.
Really? You don't think it's going to be? I mean, we went last week over the options, and it was slim to none.
They think it's going to be Fields now. I mean, as we sit here, you bring back Fields, you bring in somebody. The Slim and Nunn are both guys that are available at both in the draft and free agency. This is all too soon to think about this, but yeah, I would imagine as we sit here and the fires still rage somewhere here in L.A., that it would be Fields on a decent contract. Dulac even said that. It'll be Fields, and it'll be on a not crazy contract. Those were his exact words. So that makes sense right now. You bring someone else in, say they're going to compete with Fields, and then give it to Fields, and then hope for the best.
Well, I mean, why not hope for the best with Russ then? What's the difference? What's the difference between Fields and Russ at this point?
I don't know if Russ can play behind this offensive line. I mean, they're going to be better, but I think that was sort of the problem with Russ, is that it's not, his skills have atrophied. Sure, I mean, the arm is still great, but I think with his decreased mobility, he couldn't be an above-average quarterback anymore behind a line that was decidedly above average, particularly by the time the good football team showed up.
The line was above average.
No. That the line is. I'm sorry. Maybe I misspoke. That the line was the line was below average.
Yeah.
And they were able to get by with that when they were playing other teams. And then by the time the Eagles and the Ravens again and the Chiefs got here, that it was simply too much to bear.
I mean, did they put up? They couldn't. They scored more than 14 points once in the past 5 weeks.
I mean, it's what is it? The worst offensive output since before Chuck Noll? Didn't I read that somewhere?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think Kazora had that. So that's my feelings about Russ. I think he's still got something left, but I think he'd have to play behind like a really, really good offensive line to get it out of there. Justin, if nothing else, can flee. And that can be a real weapon, and maybe that makes you back off a little bit. And maybe so. I also expect the offensive line to also look very different as part of those big changes Tomlin said were coming by the time we get to anywhere else in this offseason.
Let's talk offensive line. By Josh Carney. Josh Carney, Dan Moore, and Broderick Jones finished number 1 and 2 in the regular season in sacks allowed, according to PFF. And they have a chance to finish 1 and 2 in postseason. Major indictment on the O-line and coaching. So the O-line, my fear coming into the season seems to be what was certainly maybe not the downfall, but the slippage or something. Dan Moore is gone.
He lost so much money in the last month.
Is Broderick Jones? Can we guarantee him at left tackle, or could there still be?
Tomlin's not going to give up on him.
What about what? So what has to change on the line then? If this is a major indictment on the O line,
well, I think it's going to help having Fautanu back. I think it's interesting because you were concerned about the offensive line before all the injuries that hit it. Losing Daniel at the beginning of the season, absolutely. I mean, Mason McCormick was very impressive for a fourth-round rookie, but my word, you don't want the fourth-round rookie out there on the offensive line. Presumably, he'll make that leap that so many other players have. Not that he'll be at a Pro Bowl level, but certainly go from struggling rookie to competent professional.
The Dotson leap.
Yeah, the Dotson leap, which occurred here in L.A. But yes, and Frazier will certainly get better, who was already their best offensive lineman. They will. It's the Steelers, so when they lose a player, they'll bring a player in. When they lose Dan Moore, they'll bring someone else in, whether that's a draft pick or another free agency or something like that. We do know that under the Weidl, for as much say as he has in roster construction, that offensive line is a priority. I mean, it certainly would help a lot. Again, it's not stopping Derrick Henry, but in a way it could if you keep him from getting the ball. So I imagine they'll invest in that too. I don't know if that means a big free agent splash, but it could. They're going to have a lot of money at if they're only paying so much for Justin. That's one real way to improve the team. So, yeah, I imagine they will bring in – I know they'll bring in someone else for the offensive line. I'm just not sure how much they'll bring in somebody new to be a star contributor versus just hoping that these guys improve, because while they may lack talent in this first season, they sure don't lack youth.
At David M. Todd, David Todd. Here's a reality check on the Steelers' offense. Who underperformed expectations? Broderick Jones? Absolutely. Isaac Seumalo? Yes. That's about it. We can debate a few others, but most were close to what was expected. So what does that tell you? Not enough talent. Where was it just a poor roster on offense? I mean, we complained about the wideout room all season. Sure. Tight ends, we didn't really see any of them really rise up to their next level of expectations. Offensive line, I guess you can say the same. Is it just was this just not that good of an offense?
Yeah, it's not enough talent. I mean, you beat me to it. I was going to say that wasn't just the problem with the offensive line. That was the problem with the offense. Now, this wasn't the offensive line that was supposed to play. I mean, you were supposed to have the Daniel. I don't remember if he'd been to a Pro Bowl, but he certainly had Pro Bowl consideration. You're supposed to have Fautanu out there. You were supposed to have Dan Moore on the bench. So it's not like their depth was tested, and it was tested to the point they found that they didn't have it. And I think that had a kind of trickle down effect on everything else. But yeah, I mean, the wide receiver room, they need two, if not three wide receivers. And I'd certainly consider trading George, at least seeing what you could get for him. But yeah, they need a lot of talent all over the offense, and fortunately, they have money to spend on it. But they better go find it.
It's getting pretty pricey out there. If we're going to give a contract to Justin Fields, and that's going to be over $20 million, I imagine.
Sport Truck had it at like 10.
Really?
But I'm with you. I think it'll be higher than that. I think because someone else is going to want to spend money on him after those 6 games, which I don't necessarily get, but I can sort of see it. Yeah.
Didn't Mitch Trubisky get 10 a year, and that was 3 years
right,
ago?
That's what I thought. Yeah, and Mitch was, certainly looked a lot more suspect than Justin.
All right, so the offense is still rebuilding. Is it a rebuild, or are we just never? I feel with the offensive line, the rebuild should have been over, but it wasn't. I don't know. I don't know. Are we still rebuilding? Did we miss a build? Did we? We're still missing some pieces.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. And here's the thing: that's the optimistic way of looking at it. The optimistic way of looking at it is to say this is still the rebuild. That the rebuild is still ongoing. To say that this was the competitive team, the one that was supposed to compete for a championship, that's not. So I've been debating that exact thing since Saturday night. Is this a step forward in the rebuild? Did they find some pieces? Yes, but the rebuild isn't as far along as I had hoped, nor that I had thought.
Yeah, by the time we get an offense together, then there's not going to be a defense.
Right.
And we still got to pay defense. We still have to pay TJ. Isn't he due for an extension?
He's due for an extension. Yes. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's a little cheaper than it used to be after the last month. But yeah, that's still going to be pricey.
Okay. Yeah, I just feel like, man, a rebuild is every position now all of a sudden,
Yes, that's what happens when you I mean, I don't know if you saw that thing about, the drafts and all the guys that are gone. What was it, like the 2018 draft through the 2021 draft? They're going to have like 3 players left from all those drafts. And that's what happens when you don't, when the draft picks don't hit, then you end up here.
Okay, everyone gets a little blame. At Neil Coulong. George Kittle would destroy any cornerback tackling him solo in the open field. What is this? A soft tight end for a soft offense on a soft team. This was in specific in reference to Muth when
he didn't get the first.
He didn't get the first down. Now he was, his momentum was he wasn't running in a straight line. His momentum was coming, whereas the DB was kind of running in a straight line of attack. So that was a little misleading. But Muth didn't have he was expected to be the number 2 receiver, and make up for any lack in the wideout room. And I don't think that was the case. I couldn't tell you Should I look up his stats? I couldn't tell you.
I know they're not what a number 2 wide receiver should be. I mean, there were games where he played better. There were games he didn't. I mean, I optimistically throughout the season and in my finding of excuses throughout the year, which is part of what I do here. I thought, they need him in there to block, but no. There were a lot of times they just didn't get the plays done, and then that's how we ended up with this, the 4th and inches that Tomlin didn't go for. And I go back and forth on that. I mean, is that living in your fears? Yes, but should you have faith that this team can get inches? Absolutely not. So I don't know. I think there's a bad either way there, but and that was when the game was still in doubt for that very, very brief period of time when this game was in doubt.
I think it was when they were down 14-0 and gave up the 21 right before halftime.
Yes.
Right, that was pretty much.
I think it was down 14. I mean, I sat here last week and said all I wanted to see was them not go down double digits in the first half. That was the one thing I wanted to see, and they couldn't do it.
Freiermuth had 653 yards this season, seven touchdowns. That's not horrible.
No.
But for his career, it's like 2190. So he's basically done the same thing for.
Is that the first time we've looked up stats live on this show?
So.
I feel like this is wow. We're really growing as a podcast. I don't open that Pandora's box. So now I'm concerned. I mean, I still believe Pat's the best tight end option they're going to have. But man, they need to find a way to incorporate all of this more. I wonder how much a part of that is, particularly on the stretch, just not having the ball. I mean, you can't, they try to run the ball on first down. That doesn't work. And then you can't really throw to the tight end a whole lot if you're always going 3 and out.
All right. Let's talk some con season at Fat Boy Cam. Players we need to let go. All right, where do you stand on letting these go? Cam Sutton.
Absolutely. They shouldn't have brought him in. That's an indictment on the franchise. You want to criticize Tomlin and Con for something? That is. Bringing Sutton in, leaving him out there, that was a horrible decision on so many levels. They should have made him drive home from Baltimore.
Well, I mean, signing him wasn't, we didn't know coming in what
No, but it's one thing to be like, we're going to put our neck out for this guy who's got this questionable past. Oh, Andy's terrible. Like that, you bet on somebody and it all went bad. They were criticized for it roundly then, and then there's a karmic thing in that. Like, you believe that this guy that might have been suspect and it came back to bite you. Like
Najee Harris.
I mean, I love Najee. I just don't think he's a good fit for this team. This offensive line is not good enough. This team, to get everything out of him, someone's going to throw real money at him. I love the guy. I love the player. But they're going to let him go, and there's not a fit for him, unfortunately.
Van Jefferson.
Sweetest dude, nicest guy. Absolutely shouldn't have been the number 2 receiver on this team. I mean, again, not his fault. He made a few big catches in the end zone, but no. I mean, if you want to have him back as like the 5, I mean, sure. But it's to have him out there in the position he was, I imagine he'll be gone as well.
Russell Wilson, you've already said pass on Russ. Mm-hmm. Minka Fitzpatrick.
I mean, I've been told all season that there are these things that Minka keeps the other team from doing, and then over the last month of the season, it seemed like the other team was doing them, that there were not other things that the other team could have been doing, that Minka's presence was precluding. So I assume still having him there, they're paying him an extraordinary amount of money for his position, so I can't imagine he's going anywhere. But man, that seems like a place where you could do one of those restructures to get extra money to bring in someone else.
If there is anyone else, I don't even know what, I don't know who's out there.
They'll keep Minka. I mean, this is, when Tomlin says big changes, I imagine that means like they're going to fire Terrell Austin or something. Like it's not, Minka's going to be fine.
We'll see. I don't know. I'm not ready to count him out either. We'll see. If he does, he does. But if he doesn't, then I would say, oh yeah, I didn't really expect that either. I don't know what big changes. I don't know what.
Tomlin said it. I'm not telling you.
He
said there'd be big changes. There should be. I mean, it's it can't keep playing uncompetitive football against contenders.
Oh, I don't know. Dante Jackson.
Boy, that's a weird one. I mean, he looked so bad down the stretch, but he was fighting an injury. That's the toughest one. It's easy to say he's Akello Witherspoon again, but how severe was that injury down the stretch? I mean, I was thinking, what's going to be the excuse for this loss? I mean, every year we come up with a different excuse for the playoff loss, like, oh, Ben was old, or TJ wasn't there, or Pouncey hadn't snapped it over Ben's head. I think this year's going to be the flu. I think that's going to be our excuse that we eventually coalesce around as the days come to pass. And I kind of wonder if Dante Jackson's injury is going to be a part of that. I imagine they're going to be pretty proactive in getting in a new corner. I imagine that would be one of the earlier picks in the draft. But I could see them cutting Dante, but I could also see them keeping him out there almost in the way that, who was the guy? Oh, I feel so bad. I forget his name. He played some decent games. Joey Porter Jr.'s rookie season last year. Not Patrick Peterson, the other guy that ended up coming from the Bills that was, Joey
Levi Wallace.
Yeah. Joey supplanted him by the end of the season. I could see whatever new corner, particularly if it's a young draft pick, comes in and he's sort of on that exact trajectory where Dante starts the season and the season comes on. It's like 2 dogs, 1 bone, and then maybe you're kind of relegated to the back a bit.
I'd bring back Dante Jackson. I don't think it was an excuse that no one's making excuses, I don't think. I think Jackson, he had the picks. I think he played fine. I wouldn't mind bringing him back. Right? What's the option? It's going to be Joey Porter, Beanie Bishop, who is, just barely an undrafted rookie now.
Right.
And
should make a leap, at least as a nose for being around the ball. They're going to bring someone in. I mean, whether they keep Dante Jackson or not, they're going to bring in another corner, whether it's a high draft pick, whether it's a free agent. There will be another corner in that locker room.
As much as the defense, was less than, the defense could have held Baltimore to 16 points and it wouldn't have mattered in that
right.
game, Cordell Patterson, who's still under contract, I believe.
Who posted on Instagram the other day, I guess I'll shovel snow since I'm not going to touch the ball. Cordero Patterson will most likely be gone. I would be very surprised if he was around. He was here for one thing, to be a kickoff returner, and he was absolutely towards the bottom of the league in that. Whatever burst he may have had as a running back had completely disappeared by the end of the season, who also, I know he suffered an injury earlier in the season. So I'd be very surprised if Cordero Patterson comes in, because they are going to bring in another running back, if not 2. You'll get one as like a mid-round draft pick probably, and then maybe like an older guy, like this year's other Cordero Patterson, to come in. He will most likely be gone.
I think he'll still be around. He's under contract, and it wasn't that much, right?
Right. That's the thing. It wasn't that much. That could keep him around. Could be a strong argument for him.
And for a while, he was showing bigger boost in some situations than Najee. I don't know. And then Russell Wilson again. Okay, great. So that's okay. Last thing here. At Fantaskippy, Jeffrey Benedict. The Steelers still have 0 playoff wins without Dan Rooney as an executive or primary owner. Someday people are going to realize that's not a coincidence. I mean, what in the world with if Dan Rooney was still here would be different in that ball club than what we've seen?
I can't imagine. I mean, the only things I can think of off the top of my head were, has Art let Tomlin have more control over things that aren't just head coaching, like more of a say in the defense, more of a say in the offense, more of a say in like the drafting and development than he had under Dan. I find that a little hard to believe. I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine that Dan was like, pushing back on whatever suggestions the Tomlin and or I guess at that time would have been Colbert were making, and Dan was making the right decision. That requires me doing a little too much mind reading for me to say that it makes sense.
Well, there's someone we could ask about that. Why don't we ask Art's brother, nice. Jim Rooney? We'll take a quick break. We'll come back and talk with Jim Rooney, who has written the book A Different Way to Win, Dan Rooney's story from the Super Bowl to the Rooney Rule, and we'll see what he has to say about that. So hold tight, and we'll get Jim Rooney here. All right, welcome back. I'm very excited to talk to today's guest, the author of the book, A Different Way to Win, Dan Rooney's story from the Super Bowl to the Rooney Rule, now available on audiobook, which is how I listen to it, and I recommend that version. He's the grandson of the chief, son of the late ambassador, Jim Rooney. Welcome to What Yin's Talking About.
Kyle, great to be with you. Thanks for having me today.
First off, what was it like growing up in such an iconic family? When did you first realize, your family's significance in the community?
Well, I hate this to sound negative, but I remember being in a hotel in Miami for a game when I was about 4 years old, and at that age you remember sort of pieces of things. But someone asked me for tickets, and my mother grabbed my hand and gave the person a hard time. So that was the first memory that I have. Things were a little bit different, but then the next one was pretty special. Um, I guess I was six during the Immaculate Reception, and so my mother didn't take us to the games because the youngest crew because we were too annoying, I guess, during the games. Which those days have changed. All my nieces and nephews and kids, have been in the boxes during all kind of games, but my mother didn't put up with that. So, um, I remember the look and the smile and the experience. There was just this jubilance when my mother, my brother Dan first came in and they hugged me, and then my dad always went to the game separately. Obviously, he was working, so he got home about an hour after everyone else. And my dad was a guy who enjoyed things, but he enjoyed the work, and would usually move on. And when something was completed, he moved on to the next thing. But I will never forget just the powerful experience of us all being together that night. It was something special.
Wow. So your dad published his own memoir in 2007. So what makes your project, unique compared to that?
Yeah, I think that the two things in the audiobook we have not put much of this in, but in the physical book we did. We talk a lot about his time in Ireland. So that's not in the audiobook. We're actually talking to a couple Irish studies programs about doing a project with the interviews I have from that part of the story. So we wanted to add that, and then the Rooney Rule. The Rooney Rule wasn't in his book because it hadn't been really established yet. So we wanted to talk about my father's work as a commitment towards trying to find fairness, equity, opportunity for folks, and that he did that throughout his career. And so what is recognized sort of nationally as this Rooney Rule policy really was the way he had worked, and many things he learned from my grandfather, but was really, I think, the bedrock of the Steelers' success, that you can have the highest standards possible and still do something that has a real impact on the people involved, whether it's individuals or a larger community, and that both were sort of the priority for my father in his approach to business. So we felt like adding the Rooney Rule to that story was essential.
Okay, so before the dynasty, not a lot of winning, and then your dad takes charge and builds this championship culture. Was it football instincts? Was it business instincts? How did your dad create this change?
Yeah, and I think that's such a good question because I've seen people kind of criticize me saying, "Oh, your grandfather, should get more credit, this and that." And like my grandfather was an amazing man. I got to spend a lot of time with him when I was young. But the truth was, he was, like you said, he didn't really grow up in football. He grew up in baseball. He was a really good baseball player, and he grew up in boxing. And, that's an individual sport, and that was his best sport. And then, the stuff around horse racing. So all of the things that he did in the sports industry, which I think were important, didn't require the same operational expertise. When you promote an event, the event might be, 6 months from now, and there's project management. There's a whole lot of skill in terms of who would have interest in that? How do you get to them, especially in the days where you don't have all these platforms, et cetera, to get a hold of people. And he was great at that. And he was great at getting sort of the power brokers involved to help stand up event, help fund them, whatever the case might be. But a football team to be successful, it is a 24/7 type of operation, and now it's 24/7, 365. And my father really had the discipline. He went to college in a way. My grandfather went to college, but he was really more of a student athlete, where my father played sports at Duquesne, but really was a student and, understood economics, understood business processes, and then began to deploy them in a way that my grandfather hadn't. They both, I think, understood sports, but I think my father grew up in a football locker room, where my grandfather grew up, as a boxer, and I think there is a difference there.
And not just with the Steelers, but with the whole NFL. Dan Rooney played a big role in getting a salary cap and revenue sharing in the league, and it seems like that was a foresight that even maybe Major League Baseball today doesn't have. Where did that unique foresight for this kind of business come from?
Well, look, we'd all like to say it's brilliance, and I think there was some real vision there between my father and Pete Rozelle, Wellington Mara, who owned the Giants, a whole host of other folks. And so I think they had great vision, but they were also responding to baseball and the fact that baseball was just such a bigger sport. It would be like football versus lacrosse today. I mean, the differentiation was almost that great. And I hope lacrosse is very successful, but what Pete Rozelle understood is we have to create a differentiator, and he sold everyone on the idea that if we go in on a league-wide package with television, that will allow us to be stronger across the board than what baseball was. And baseball had no interest in doing that because they had been so successful for the 100 previous years with bringing people to games. And Pete understood that television was just the perfect format to attract viewers. It fit the schematics of the appetite of the viewer. People like measurements. The field lines are very clearly projected onto the television screen. It's a rectangle, the same as an old-fashioned television screen. So many things just worked out so perfectly for football. And my father, along with Vince Lombardi, who the Super Bowl trophy's named after, were really the tag team that went and convinced the Maras, who owned the Giants, that this made sense, and that in the long run that a strong league would allow them to be even more successful. Which, when you think about it, they were in the same position as the Yankees, and the Yankees make unbelievable money, and the Pirates struggle to compete. Where we're basically on the same fundamental footing as the Giants. The Giants are able to produce certain revenue streams that we can't, but overall we're in the same ballpark. And so my father and Vince Lombardi were the guys that really convinced the Maras that this would be good and was the right decision. And then when the Maras made that decision, that was the beginning of why the NFL has just dominated the sports and entertainment industry for the last 75 years.
Yeah, I mean, have to be one of the biggest, one of the biggest decisions, probably. Rooney Rule, obviously named after him. What's the state of the rule today? We're at that time where a lot of coaching turnover. Do you monitor the comings and goings of things? To keep a tab on that at all?
I do. I work with a lot of folks that are very invested. The Fritz Pollard Alliance is an organization that works both with the NFL, but also is designed to kind of push back against them to make sure that they're creating opportunities. And so I pay very much attention. I think what is always interesting to me is the spirit of the rule. The look, at the end of the day, I want, because I think it was important to my father to see greater diversity with the opportunities, but how he came up with the rule, and he worked with a lot of people. I don't want to just give him credit, but was look, he didn't want a group of people to not have opportunity, in lieu of a new group getting the opportunity. He wanted to create a process that really was based in greater fairness, that would give folks an opportunity to interview. But that wasn't where the decision making was. He didn't change the decision making node. He just wanted to make sure that folks who weren't getting a chance to get in the room could get in there, and that was based on his experience with Tony Dungy, because he felt, Tony was a better coach than folks were recognizing, and the fact that he was getting so few interviews, you know, resulted in this idea that well, that's why he wasn't getting the jobs. So my father really looked at that and said, okay, what's a node that we can have an impact on, but doesn't change someone's right to make an individual decision, and so that's what the Rooney Rule is on a really high level. And so I try to pay attention. I would like to see, greater results with minority coaches. But I also, respect that my father looked at sort of both sides of the coin and wanted to make sure that you created something that again, really drove a change. But at the end of the day, the final choice would give everyone a fair chance.
Would you say that the biggest hurdle is teams and executives being faithful to the rule, like not just I don't know, not just going through the motions to meet
Yep.
the check the box,
Yep. No, I think there is some box checking that unfortunately goes on, and I think there are some endemic and systemic problems that we as a society face, and I think that there, to some degree, are folks that don't want the face of their franchise, if they will, to be someone that looks different. So I think that's real, and I'm not going to back down from that argument. But I also think the other problem is, for whatever reasons, and we can look historically at the prevention of black men becoming quarterbacks, but I think we're moving past that in a really strong and significant way. And I hope that what that results in is, more opportunities at the quarterback coaching position, which leads to more offensive coordinators. And so if I look at where the pipeline has a problem, it's at the offensive coordinator level, and there's been less folks, from a minority experience in the offensive coordinator, and football is, for better or worse, is an offensive game now, and so you're just going to have a greater shot if you're an offensive coordinator versus a defensive coordinator.
For the Steelers, now that the season is over, attention turns to Mike Tomlin. Looking back at his hiring in 2007, do you remember what the conversation was like? Was it an agonizing decision? Was it an easy decision for your father at the time? Do you remember what some of those conversations were back then?
Well, it's funny because both with Bill and Mike, and I assume to some degree with Coach Noll, my father conducted the process that is the basis of why he thinks the Rooney Rule would work, and that is, he took more time than everyone else. He didn't, we have great respect for the media, but he didn't get worried about what folks were saying, that you're going to lose this coach or that opportunity if you don't do this or that. And he followed through on the process, and he was very thorough in both cases. He started with a larger pool of candidates than I think anyone else starts with. With Mike, I believe it was 37 coaches.
Wow.
I remember talking to Kevin about this, Kevin Colbert. We got down to 12, and in that original number, because it was so large, you had a lot more minority candidates than other folks were looking at. You get down to 12, and then down to 4, and I think all 4 of the final coaches ended up being head coaches, and I'm thinking, oh no, Russ never got a chance to be head coach, but 3 of the 4 were head coaches, and all of them have been in Super Bowls or championship games. So I think having a thorough process, taking your time, allows you to really, get to know folks who have talent in a way that if you just jump after, a guy who is in the media or whatever, and you're kind of falling for that, I don't think that helps your system or your culture.
You know, despite the years without a playoff win under Mike Tomlin recently, but he advocates for coaching opportunities for those who might not have it. It feels like. Do you feel like that Tomlin lives up to some of the standards that were set by, say, like your dad, Bill Nunn, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. I think Mike has worked hard on that, but I think Mike has also had an awareness that he wants to make sure that he's doing it the right way, that he's not just giving folks an opportunity because for one reason or another, but that he's giving folks who really could excel opportunities. And I think he's done a very good job of that. I think that the way the Steelers do business, and people can argue with us because we haven't had a lot of success in the playoffs lately, but I think it is different than how other teams do business. So, you see how good Omar is doing as general manager, but several folks didn't take the opportunity to hire him, which I think was a mistake on their part. We do things differently, and I don't think folks always kind of like the methodologies, the attention to detail, the ways that things are slower, but there's more continuity. I hear the criticism of fans of not winning playoff games for sure, but I do think in the long run, the methods that my father set up are the best practices, and I think they are you know counter to the way a lot of folks do things, and they don't hire our people, which I think is a mistake on their part, not a reflection of us, not hiring the right people.
Some would say, the Steelers haven't had a playoff win since your father's passing. Some would say that's not a coincidence. Is there any substance to that? Would things be any different if your father was still a presence in the club, or has, enough of the ideals still in the building?
No, I don't agree with that. I think my brother has really done a fantastic job. Look, I don't want to be making excuses, but I think there are real rationales. I think we went through a time, and you go through these eras, or however you want to call them, where we had a lot of strong offensive players, but our defensive players and some of the guys we took, particularly Ryan, you get in a situation where you didn't have the defensive strength for a while, and then the arc goes the other way. And I think the fact of the matter is, we have played teams in the playoffs, other than, which Dad was alive for this, other than sort of the Tebow game. I think that most of the time the teams we lost to, even Jacksonville, there's two Hall of Famers and four All Pros on that defense that we lost to in Jacksonville. You can say Peyton was old, but he was Peyton Manning in Denver when we lost to Denver. Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes. The Browns loss is certainly a struggle. The Browns loss was weird though. That whole situation, and again, that maybe that is an excuse, but COVID just had such an impact, and so that situation, if you want to use that as a point, fine. But I think in every other case, us getting to the playoffs with teams that I don't know are as strong as the other playoff teams is an accomplishment versus the counter argument.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. What issues do you think your dad would be focused on today in the NFL, or what issues maybe around the corner do you think he would be fascinated with today?
Well, like I said, I think my brother has stepped up. He's the chair. I don't know I don't know how often they change chairs, but he's been the chair of the diversity committee. He's on the executive committee of five owners that advise Roger on Roger Goodell on some of the major issues. I think he has worked in a way that's consistent with my father, my grandfather, the way they came to the league. It is a different world, when you look at the 1930s to 1990s. You had few of what we now call billionaires. You had folks that were successful, but most of the folks that owned teams were, like Art Rooney or George Halas. They were sportsmen that came into the league, and we were family businesses, and we certainly achieved success that was locked beyond our capability in many ways. But you had these family businesses. Now these are much more corporate organizations. They're looking at return on investment in a way that is different than what my father and certainly my grandfather had to function under. And I think some of the parameters which decisions on the league are based on things, not that there were bad business decisions prior, but I do think this drive for ROI in every circumstance, I think it has an impact on the game. And I think Art does a great job of working to maintain, our point of view and our culture, both in the team, but also in the league decision making, while having to function within the world that we live in today. So, I think he's done an excellent job and in doing that. So I don't want to kind of say what would my dad look at in a way that is different than my brother. There's a few things here or there that I think my father would struggle with. He was, some would say he was, didn't make sense with how much he warned us against money becoming our God. That was the big thing he always talked about. Don't let money become your God. And some people would say he was a little too fundamentalist on that. But at the end of the day, I think over and over again, I see, there was some real wisdom in that, and I think Art carries that. But certainly that was Dad's number one view, and I think it drove a lot of decisions that the way the NFL is built now would be in some conflict with that.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I appreciate your time. The book is A Different Way to Win, Dan Rooney's story from the Super Bowl to the Rooney Rule. Jim, thanks so much. Do you have a favorite all-time Steeler? Who's your favorite Steeler?
Well, since he's right behind me, I'll say Franco. And you get to hear a great interview I did with Franco in the audiobook. So I hope folks tune in. I think they'd really enjoy it.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, you hear the interviews with Roger Goodell, interviews with Coach Tomlin. Yeah, the audiobook I think is certainly the way to go if you're into that. All right, Jim, congrats on the book, and I wish
Thanks,
you
Kyle.
success.
And I know there's some tough conversations, but we appreciate all the love and appreciate you putting this podcast and all this work out there. We're grateful that you're keeping the story going.
All right, well, thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kyle. You too.
Take care. All right. So big thanks to Jim Rooney for dialing in, zooming in. That was very cool. His book, I listened to the book as an audiobook, and I think that's very cool. You get an interview with Roger Goodell, with Tomlin, with
cool.
Mel Blount. There's Franco. I don't know if it's an interview or there's an interview with Franco before he passed. So there's a lot of good stuff on the audiobook version of that. All right. Well, that is it for us this week. We can keep the conversation going on social media. I'm at Kyle Kreis on. Is TikTok still here with us? By this time next week, maybe it's not, but I'm going to be, don't worry, I'm going to still be on TikTok, even if I have to be an outlaw, a social media outlaw. I will
Dark
not be,
web.
Yeah, I will not be moving my time to Twitter any more than it already has.
Oh, that's the right attitude. That is the right attitude, regardless of anything.
We'll have a special episode next week. It is the 2024 season of the Yinzy Awards. Is it the 4th annual Yinzy Awards?
Yes, because we started in August of 2021, so it would have been 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. Yes.
So it's the best and worst of your takes for the 2024 season.
What a rich catalog to choose from.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that. Maybe we can get a special guest to join us or something. I don't know. Maybe we can. How can we spice this up to make it even better than The Fan or Mark Madden or Matt Williamson? Any of these guys?
Oh,
whatever.
Williamson's good. You can't put Williamson with the other guys.
Just did. He's in there. See ya. All right. Until next week. Keep listening to your coach.
Be their best selves. That's going to be required.
Stay in school.